Have you ever wondered why some moments in bed feel electric, while others, even with the same person, fall flat? It's not always about technique or stamina. In fact, what truly drives women wild often comes down to subtle shifts in connection, rhythm, and control. I'm Dr. Justin Lehmiller, and today we're diving into what she really wants in bed, the hidden desires behind 5 underrated positions that most men overlook. These aren't about athleticism or acrobatics. They're about unlocking sensations that awaken her mind as much as her body. Because when pleasure meets psychology, that's where real passion begins. All right, let's talk about something that, for all its importance, still tends to live in the shadows of our conversations about desire, what women really want in bed. Now, when most people hear that question, their minds immediately jump to the physical positions, movements, intensity. But here's the fascinating truth: the body responds not just to what's happening to it, but to what's happening inside it, emotionally, psychologically, hormonally. That's why when we talk about sexual satisfaction, especially for women, we can't separate the physical from the emotional or the emotional from the psychological. They are part of one beautifully complex system that craves connection as much as it craves pleasure. In my years of research on sexual behavior, I've found that what many women desire most in bed isn't just an orgasm or even variety, but a kind of connection that feels electric, the sense of being seen, desired, and understood. And that desire shows up not only in words, but in the way the body reacts. Think about it: a woman's arousal system is incredibly responsive to psychological cues. Her heartbeat quickens not only from touch, but from anticipation, from eye contact, from the feeling that her partner is completely there with her. Now, when we talk about positions that make women wild, people often assume that means something exotic or acrobatic. But in truth, the most underrated positions are often the simplest, the ones that allow intimacy to unfold in both directions. Because here's what most men miss for many women: the turn on isn't about being dominated or passive, it's about feeling chosen in a way that ignites both safety and desire at once. The body relaxes when it feels safe. And when the body relaxes, it becomes infinitely more responsive, more sensitive to touch, more open to pleasure. Let's look at this from a psychological lens for a second. The human brain releases oxytocin, the so called bonding hormone, during moments of closeness, eye contact, and even synchronized breathing. When a couple engages in a position that encourages face to face intimacy, that eye contact amplifies oxytocin's effects, deepening emotional connection while heightening physical pleasure. The paradox is that the softer the moment feels, the stronger the arousal can become. It's the difference between being touched and being felt. I remember a woman once describing to me that her favorite position wasn't the one that made her climax the fastest. It was the one that made her feel completely seen. She said, "It's not about how deep he goes, it's about how deep he looks." That statement struck me because it captures something deeply primal about desire. Our brains are wired to crave validation through attention. When we feel attended to, when our partner's focus is entirely on us, the pleasure system in the brain lights up like fireworks. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, all of these chemicals start dancing together in perfect synchrony. Now let's step into something more concrete. Imagine a position that allows both bodies to align chest to chest, breath mingling, movement synchronized. What's happening physiologically in that moment is fascinating. Each inhalation becomes a cue for rhythm, each exhalation, a release. The nervous system begins to mirror the partner's, a process called interpersonal synchrony. It's something scientists have observed in dancers, musicians, and yes, lovers. When two people move in sync, the brain interprets that as harmony, trust, and unity. And that feeling, that merging, is what heightens arousal far beyond the physical. Here's something else that's often misunderstood. Many women describe their most intense experiences not as moments of domination, but of co creation. They don't just want to be done to, they want to participate, to feel that the pleasure is mutual, evolving, alive. That's why underrated positions are so powerful. They tend to allow space for communication, whispered words, subtle adjustments, laughter, even pauses. Those moments, rather than breaking the mood, actually deepen it. Because sex isn't a performance, it's a dialogue without words. In one study conducted by researchers in the field of sexual psychophysiology, they found that women's levels of arousal increased significantly when partners maintained high levels of eye contact and physical closeness, regardless of the specific movements or positions. The takeaway was clear: the brain is the ultimate erogenous zone. Stimulation of emotional intimacy directly translates into heightened physical response. This explains why positions that allow for closeness are often underrated. They don't look dramatic, but they feel transformative. When a woman can wrap her legs around her partner, draw him in, or even guide the pace with subtle movements of her hips. She experiences a sense of agency that enhances arousal. In psychological terms, it satisfies both autonomy and connection, two of the deepest human needs in intimacy. It's the paradox of desire. We crave closeness, but we also crave the freedom to express ourselves within it. I often tell couples that what's missing from their sexual connection isn't necessarily variety, but presence, because presence is what turns simple movements into magnetic experiences. Imagine the difference between someone going through the motions versus someone who pauses, reads your breath, matches your rhythm, and responds. That's what makes touch feel alive. The body knows when it's being seen, and it rewards that awareness with deeper sensitivity. There's also something fascinating about how women's arousal systems differ from men's. For men, arousal often follows a straightforward physical trajectory: stimulus, response, release. For women, it's more circular, more layered. Psychological safety feeds physical excitement, which in turn fuels emotional closeness. It's like a loop, each part amplifying the other. That's why when a woman says, I need to feel connected first, she's not being sentimental. She's describing a biological truth. Her arousal depends on how emotionally attuned her partner is. And this brings us back to those underrated positions, the ones that encourage communication, mutual rhythm, and closeness. In those moments, the brain interprets the experience not just as pleasure, but as bonding. It releases dopamine for excitement, oxytocin for closeness, and endorphins for satisfaction. It's like nature's way of saying, stay here. This is good for you. Now, let's take this one step deeper. Have you ever noticed how in certain positions, touch becomes more exploratory, more sensory? Skin against skin, the temperature difference, the way a fingertip traces along a shoulder or a thigh, all of these micro sensations feed directly into the somatosensory cortex, the brain's touch processing hub. But here's the secret: when that touch is paired with emotional context, eye contact, a whisper, a sigh, it lights up more of the brain. The reward centers, the memory centers, even areas linked to empathy. That's why the same act can feel mechanical or magical, depending on the energy exchanged. So, what does she really want? Most women aren't chasing novelty, they're chasing depth. They want to feel desired in a way that dissolves self consciousness. When a man pays attention to her responses, her breathing, her subtle movements, he's effectively telling her nervous system, you're safe to let go. And when she lets go, the experience transforms. What follows isn't just pleasure, it's surrender, the ultimate form of trust. I've spoken with countless couples over the years, and one pattern I've seen again and again is that the most fulfilling sexual experiences are often described as immersive. People lose track of time, lose awareness of where one body ends and the other begins. This isn't just poetic, it's neurochemical. During high arousal, the brain's sense of self, governed by the prefrontal cortex, temporarily quiets down. That's why great sex feels like transcendence. The ego dissolves, replaced by unity. The irony is that chasing performance often blocks this experience. When we focus too much on doing it right, we shift from sensation to evaluation, activating parts of the brain associated with anxiety. But when we let go of judgment, when we allow slowness, laughter, eye contact, the parasympathetic nervous system takes over. That's the rest and pleasure mode, the state where deep arousal flourishes. So, when we talk about positions that make women wild, what we're really talking about are the ones that unlock this state. Positions that allow her to feel both seen and safe, both desired and in control. When she feels that her partner isn't rushing toward a goal, but exploring a connection, her body opens up in ways that surprise even her. A fascinating study from the Kinsey Institute found that couples who reported the highest sexual satisfaction weren't necessarily the ones who had sex the most often. They were the ones who reported feeling emotionally tuned in during intimacy. They kissed more, looked into each other's eyes more, and talked more openly about what felt good. It's not the quantity of sex that matters, it's the quality of attention. Here's where psychology meets practice. When partners maintain emotional presence, even the simplest position can feel like an entirely new experience. It's not about inventing new tricks, it's about rediscovering what's already there. That's why underrated positions often create the most powerful reactions. They slow things down just enough to make every touch meaningful. If you've ever heard someone say, it wasn't what he did, it's how he made me feel. That's the essence of this. Pleasure without connection fades quickly, pleasure with connection lingers. It becomes memory association, something the body remembers long after the act is over. The next time she sees him, hears his voice, or even smells his skin, her body recalls that moment of surrender. That's the real power of intimacy. It imprints. And maybe that's the most underrated truth of all. What women want in bed isn't just intensity, it's intimacy. It's to be with someone who isn't just touching her body, but meeting her mind, her emotions, her essence. The positions that allow for that, where eyes meet, breath sink, hands explore, become the gateways to something far deeper than pleasure. They become portals to connection, to trust, to the kind of wildness that only emerges when she feels completely safe to lose control. Because in the end, the secret isn't in the position itself. It's in the psychology beneath it, the chemistry of connection, the biology of trust, and the art of attention. That's what makes her wild, not the move, but the moment. And that's where the most powerful kind of pleasure truly begins. When we think about what really turns women on, most people start with the obvious: touch, rhythm, chemistry. But if you look closer, the real story lies somewhere far deeper, somewhere between psychology and biology, between power and surrender, because what women often crave most in bed isn't just physical pleasure. It's a sense of control and awareness of their own desire. And the fascinating thing is that sense of control doesn't always mean being in charge. Sometimes it means the freedom to choose when to let go. I'm Dr. Justin Lehmiller, and what I want to explore with you today is how the most underrated positions in sex, ones people often overlook, can awaken something powerful in the female mind and body. These positions don't just stimulate physically, they awaken psychological circuits wired for trust, dominance, surrender, and sensory awareness. Because believe it or not, the brain plays a much bigger role in female arousal than any single muscle or movement ever could. When a woman feels in tune with her own body, something changes. Her sense of self expands into the moment. It's not just about being touched, it's about feeling herself being touched, feeling powerful in her own responsiveness. These moments happen when her body is given the space to respond naturally without pressure or performance. And that's where the underrated positions come in. They invite balance between closeness and control, stimulation and stillness, dominance and surrender. They awaken both partners to the rhythm of responsiveness rather than the rhythm of repetition. From a psychological standpoint, sexual arousal in women is complex. Unlike men, whose arousal patterns often follow a more linear path, women's arousal loops between physical and emotional stimuli. It's contextual, shaped by what's happening in her mind as much as what's happening on her skin. For instance, feeling powerful during sex doesn't just heighten confidence, it literally increases blood flow to her genitals and activates areas of the brain tied to sensory processing. The more mentally engaged she feels, the more her body opens up to sensation. Now, let's talk about that word control. It can mean very different things in the context of intimacy. For some women, control means leading the rhythm, guiding the movement, setting the pace. For others, control means trusting their partner enough to surrender that power completely. What's remarkable is that both of these states, power and surrender, light up the same neural pathways linked to reward and pleasure. They both release dopamine, the neurotransmitter of anticipation and reward, and oxytocin, the chemical of bonding. It's a duet of dominance and vulnerability that the brain interprets as deeply erotic. Think about a position where she's on top, facing her partner. It might look simple, but psychologically it's transformative. She can control the depth, the angle, the pace. She can watch his reactions, feel his hands respond to her movements. Her body becomes both the source and recipient of pleasure. In that moment, she's not just performing, she's experiencing. Neuroscientifically, this gives her brain a powerful feedback loop. Every movement she makes generates sensation, and that sensation fuels her next movement. It's self reinforcing, self empowering, and deeply satisfying. But then there's the other side of this, the art of surrender. Some of the most underrated positions are the ones that allow a woman to fully let go, to be taken in a way that feels safe, connected, and consuming. Here's the sciency: when she feels safe, her body activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for deep relaxation and openness. Her pelvic muscles relax, blood flow increases, and sensitivity amplifies. It's not about losing control, it's about choosing to release it. That choice is what transforms physical pleasure into something deeply emotional. What's so interesting is how the brain interprets this exchange. The prefrontal cortex, the part that manages judgment and self awareness, starts to quiet down. This is the same neural shift that happens during meditation or music induced trance. In this state, the boundaries between self and partner blur. She stops thinking and starts feeling. It's why people describe great sex as transcendent. It literally transcends the rational mind. Now, let's bring this back to those underrated positions that most people don't talk about. They're often the ones that encourage stillness and intimacy, positions where bodies press close, where hands explore slowly, where eye contact isn't broken. These positions activate something called interoceptive awareness, the ability to sense what's happening inside the body. Women with higher interoceptive awareness tend to experience stronger orgasms and deeper satisfaction. Why? Because they're tuned into subtle sensations, heartbeat, breath, muscle, tension, warmth, rhythm. They're not chasing pleasure, they're noticing it. This noticing is everything. In psychology, we call it embodied attention, a state where the mind fully inhabits the body. In this space, every small movement becomes amplified. The brush of a fingertip, the pause between thrusts, the sound of breath, it all matters. That's the magic of slower, more connected positions. They don't rush toward climax, they build tension like music. And that tension, both physical and emotional, is what makes women lose themselves in the moment. Here's another fascinating layer. Research shows that when women feel they can influence what happens during sex, how close, how slow, how intense, they experience higher satisfaction and stronger orgasms. It's not about control for the sake of power, it's about participation. Her body becomes a collaborator in pleasure, not a canvas. When she's able to guide or respond naturally, she engages her sensory cortex more fully. The entire nervous system becomes more responsive. But let's not mistake control for detachment. In fact, some of the most passionate moments come when control dissolves into connection. Imagine her lying back, breathing in sync with her partner, eyes half open but fully present. The body takes over, instincts emerge, and everything else, stress, self consciousness, thought, just fades. That's when the limbic system, the brain's emotional center, takes the lead. It floods the body with dopamine and oxytocin, fusing arousal with affection. What follows isn't just pleasure, it's intimacy on a cellular level. It's easy to think of sex in terms of doing, what position, what motion, what technique, but what she really wants is to feel, and feeling requires awareness. The underrated positions that heighten her sense of control or body awareness do just that. They ground her in the present moment. They awaken her to every nerve ending, every pulse, every exchange of energy. Because at its core, great sex isn't about doing more, it's about feeling deeper. I once interviewed a woman who said something that stuck with me. The sex that made me wild wasn't rough or fast, it was the kind that made me forget where I ended and he began. What she was describing wasn't just pleasure, but psychological flow. It's the same state athletes experience when they're completely immersed in movement, or musicians when they lose themselves in sound. Time disappears. Awareness narrows to sensation and connection. And when that happens during intimacy, it feels like the entire world shrinks to two beating hearts in one rhythm. From a scientific point of view, this flow state is driven by dopamine and norepinephrine. Dopamine fuels anticipation and focus, norepinephrine sharpens the senses. Together, they heighten pleasure in presence. And here's the beautiful paradox: control creates the safety that allows surrender. When a woman feels in control of the situation, emotionally, physically, her body interprets that safety as permission to let go completely. That's when pleasure becomes not just intense, but transformative. In these moments, the underrated positions become powerful tools for emotional exploration. Positions where she can take control of rhythm, give her space to explore her desires without judgment. Positions where she can surrender safely, allow her to tap into her primal instincts. Both activate the same system of trust and excitement in the brain. It's not about dominance or submission, it's about balance, the ebb and flow of energy between two people. Let's not forget the body's remarkable design. The female body has over 8,000 nerve endings concentrated in the clitoris, twice as many as the penis, and they're wired directly into the spinal cord and brain's pleasure centers. But these nerve endings don't work in isolation. They're influenced by hormones, mood, and context. When her brain perceives emotional safety, these pathways open more fully, sending stronger signals of pleasure. That's why positions that emphasize connection, eye contact, full body touch, rhythmic breathing, can amplify sensation far beyond what pure stimulation can achieve. There's also an often overlooked detail about the power of rhythm. The body loves predictability with variation, steady enough to create comfort, but surprising enough to keep the brain engaged. That's why gentle changes in pace or angle can suddenly feel electrifying. It's the same principle that makes music so emotionally powerful: anticipation followed by a satisfying release. Sex works the same way. And when you think about it, these underrated positions are really about rhythm and resonance. They create space for both partners to listen, not with words, but with the body, listening to breath, to movement, to the tiny shifts in energy that say more than language ever could. That's when sex becomes something far beyond performance. It becomes communication at its purest. So when we ask what makes women wild, the answer isn't hidden in complexity. It's hidden in awareness, in the ability to feel powerful in her own pleasure, to navigate between control and surrender, to connect with a partner who listens with every sense. When that happens, her body responds not just with arousal, but with gratitude. Because pleasure, when shared consciously, becomes healing. It reaffirms trust not just in her partner, but in her own body. The real secret isn't about positions that look impressive, it's about positions that feel authentic. Ones that awaken her body's intelligence, that let her move freely, that invite both partners to slow down and notice. Because when you strip away all the noise, all the assumptions, all the performance, what remains is the raw truth of intimacy, two people exploring what it means to feel alive together. That's what she really wants in bed, not just intensity, not novelty for its own sake, but awareness. The kind of connection that heightens her sense of control and awakens her body's natural rhythms. The kind of sex that doesn't just end with pleasure, but with a feeling of being completely understood physically, emotionally, psychologically. That's the kind of experience that lingers long after the body has rested, the kind that turns touch into memory and memory into desire all over again. Because in the end, what makes women wild isn't how much you do, but how deeply you make her feel.